Welcome back to my channel. This will be the first transfer tips of the new season heading into Game Week 2. There is still one game left at the time of this recording on Monday night between Everton and Leeds United, but I'll be covering 11 players and a bonus today in terms of buying, holding, selling and skipping. There's also a 1-week punt and that will all be covered later in this video. Like this podcast, subscribe to the channel and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy, which was released several days ago, and the draw for the Champions League will be made in 10 days time on the 28th of August, so keep your eyes peeled for that, and I will be covering the Champions League for yet another season. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, fair likes to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL and FPL Challenge Leagues, as well as Spotify can also be found in the description. A 5-star review goes a long way to supporting the channel as well. On screen, you can see the most transferred in players at this point of the game week, and unsurprisingly, Reinders is top with over 500,000 managers transferring him in, and he is now a very popular and template pick in Fantasy Premier League. But is he worth buying right now, or could we maybe wait another week or two before making that sort of purchase? I'll be talking about that. He did go up in price, of course, to 5.6 million, and he's certainly worth talking about in this video. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. There's no better place to start than with Tijjani Reinders, who scored and assisted against Wolves but didn't pick up a single bonus point, and I think the booking also played a big part in that. Defensive contributions are also a big factor this season, and Aït-Nouri picking up those defensive contribution points almost certainly helped him to get in the bonus points over Reinders in Game Week 1. And in terms of the Man City fixtures up until Game Week 6, so I'll be talking about the next 5 fixtures in general, I think Tottenham at home is still a fairly decent game for these attacking players, and Reinders can play this box-to-box and gate-crashing role as he did against Wolves, but that won't always be the case, especially with Rodri out injured. And if Nico Gonzalez doesn't start certain games, we could see Reinders playing in a deeper role, and that would mean he's less appealing from a fantasy perspective, but he could still get those DEFCON points for defensive contributions. And then it's Brighton away in Game Week 3, followed by Man United in that Manchester derby. Arsenal away in Game Week 5 looks quite tough on paper, and then Burnley at home in Game Week 6. And I think Reinders is a good long-term purchase, but in my opinion, you don't need to buy him in Game Week 2. I think you could afford to wait until Game Week 3 or 4, especially for those who went a little bit late, of course. He did go up in price to 5.6 million, and in some cases, you might be looking to go from one 5-point family midfielder to another, and you'll be priced out of it. I wouldn't be taking a -4 here in order to get Reinders in, that's for sure. I think Game Week 3 is a great time to buy Reinders. Just be very mindful that he can sometimes play different roles, and Pep doesn't have a fixed system, and apart from the likes of Erling Haaland, everybody else is subject to change. So Reinders got a goal and also an assist, of course, against Wolves. The XGI was also 0.33, and he got 10 FPL points, a very impressive showing. And in terms of his stats last season in Serie A, he got 10 goals, 5 assists, and even in UCL Fantasy, he scored 3 goals, and one of them was at the Bernabeu, and he got 20 goal contributions across all competitions. So I think he can be a great signing for Man City. That is an understatement, of course. We saw what he could do in Game Week 1 from the get-go. He is underpriced at 5.5 million, and he's now, of course, at 5.6, and very soon he could even reach the 6 million threshold in a couple of weeks' time, and his ownership, of course, is 25%, as referenced earlier in this video. At this price point and below, he is my favourite midfielder in FPL. But Tottenham Hotspur are a bogey team for Man City, and I think the best time to buy him would be in Game Week 3. This might be very surprising to some of you watching, but I think Lacroix would be a great long-term acquisition for your FPL teams, and even in Game Week 2, I wouldn't mind buying him in, because with these defenders you get a lot of DEFCON points. They can get them more frequently in the tougher games, and Crystal Palace will face Nottingham Forest at home and then Aston Villa away over the next 2. Then you've got great chances of a clean sheet against Sunderland and West Ham, followed by Liverpool. But even in those games where Crystal Palace concede a goal or 2, Lacroix can give you 3 or 4 points on a regular basis. And in terms of DEFCON last season, he would have scored 34 points from that system in place. And he already, of course, acquired 2 additional points from the DEFCON in Game Week 1 by making 15 defensive actions, clearances, blocks, interceptions and tackles. It is a little bit different though, just to kind of caveat for some people who are still unaware of the changes and also fully how it is. I'd encourage you to check out my key changes to FPL video, but for defenders, they need to make 10 defensive actions to get those DEFCON points, and you are capped at 2 additional points. So if for example, Lacroix gets 20 defensive actions, he's not going to get +4, so that won't matter so much. All you need is for your defender to get 10. It is a bit different for midfielders and forwards. They need to make 12 defensive actions, but Lacroix was still very solid against Chelsea. He delivered 8 points at Stamford Bridge, and I think he's a great long-term option. I know Daniel Munoz would be the preference with the goals and assist potential, and he can also get DEFCON as well, but I think Lacroix will be the best in terms of this system specifically in the long term, especially amongst Crystal Palace defenders. Now, he scored 1 goal and got 2 assists last season in the Premier League, and he definitely underperformed in terms of his XG, which was over 3. That is very high for a defender, and I think this season he can add a few goals to his game, especially from set pieces. So I think Lacroix will easily get over 100 FPL points, and to be honest, I'm expecting 150 plus if he stays fit. Crystal Palace's short-term fixtures aren't particularly great, but that could be very good for defensive contributions, and in the long term, I think Crystal Palace will go on a decent run, keep a few clean sheets, and Lacroix will deliver plenty of FPL points. The Premier League opener on Friday was an absolute cracker, and Liverpool won 4-2 in the end, but Semenyo equalised at one stage around the 75th minute mark, and he scored a brace, of course, for Bournemouth. He will be a talisman for the Cherries. He had 5 shots, 15 points, and his ownership will reach 10% by this time this video is published, and the long-term fixtures are looking solid against Wolves at home, Tottenham away, Brighton at home, Newcastle at home, and Leeds away. And I always said from the beginning, if you can look past that Game Week 1 fixture against Liverpool, Semenyo looks very enticing at 7 million. And I think the best piece of advice I can give to anyone watching is, if you have Semenyo, never bench him against the top teams in the country. He delivered against Arsenal last season in both matches. He got a double-digit haul against Man City. At Old Trafford he scored, and he just always picks up these points against the big 6 clubs, so to speak, and Semenyo did it once again against the Premier League champions. So I think Semenyo is definitely worth a purchase, and against Wolves at home, maybe he doesn't even do as well as he would do against Tottenham in Game Week 3, because that's the type of player he is. He does step up in the big games where Bournemouth get more space on the counter and with those quick transitions, but I still think Semenyo will improve this season in terms of the consistency and deliver against the weaker teams as well, and that's where he can get comfortably into the double-digit mark in terms of goals and also pick up plenty of assists as well. In the previous campaign, he got 11 goals and 7 assists, and I think he'll better both of those numbers this time round. And he also had 125 shots in the last Premier League campaign, which is right up there amongst all Premier League players. He also delivered 165 FPL points, and it wouldn't surprise me if he reached 200 this time round. He's going to be the best Bournemouth asset by some distance, and if you're looking for a midfielder at this price point and below, I think Semenyo is one of the better options. Aston Villa were fairly underwhelming in Game Week 1 against Newcastle. In the first half, they had 0 shots, conceded 8, and Newcastle had 2 big chances in that time frame, but ultimately their defence was quite solid, and I think that's something that has changed from the previous campaign. They ended very strongly from a defensive perspective, and you can certainly consider some of their options. Maybe not Konsa, of course, because he is suspended, and I'll talk about him fairly soon. But in the case of Ollie Watkins, the best advice I can give about him is to keep hold of him against Brentford. He has 6 goals and 2 assists in 7 matches against his former club, and the way Brentford defended against Nottingham Forest, I wouldn't be selling any Aston Villa player bar Konsa in such a scenario. Watkins didn't score or assist, of course, in that goalless draw against Newcastle. The XG was only 0.12. He had 1 shot, but it was quite tame in the end, and he got 2 FPL points, but we've seen what he's done over the last couple of years in the Premier League. In fact, he has outscored Erling Haaland over the last 2 Premier League seasons in terms of FPL points. He got 16 goals and 8 assists in the last campaign with 40 big chances, 186 FPL points, and he's also a bonus points machine. He'll combine very well with Rodgers, and I think they'll be crucial in beating Brentford away, and Aston Villa will be the favourites to do that. They'll have Emi Martinez back from suspension, and that will also be a massive plus, despite the fact that the replacement goalkeeper Bizot did a great job between the sticks. But I think Watkins is right up there for the captaincy in Game Week 2, and whether you're free hitting, wildcarding, or making normal transfers, I still think Ollie Watkins is one of the best forwards until Game Week 8. Over the course of pre-season, I think Florian Wirtz has been slightly underwhelming and Cody Gakpo has been the in-form Liverpool attacker, and I made a late decision in the deadline stream, one of the few things I did right, of going for Gakpo over Wirtz, but ultimately it's one game week, we can't draw too many conclusions just yet. And Florian Wirtz had decent underlying numbers, the XGI was around 0.42, he didn't score or assist, he obviously blanked, of course, with no defensive contributions, and the ownership is still quite high, but it is falling drastically. He is the most sold player ahead of the Game Week 2 deadline, and Liverpool's next two fixtures look quite tough against Newcastle away and Arsenal at home. But afterwards, there is a great fixture swing, starting with Burnley away in Game Week 4, and Florian Wirtz has the capability of massive returns. He is underpriced at 8.5 million, and I think he'll get double-digit goals and assists this season, despite needing a bit of time to adapt to the Premier League. In the Bundesliga, he got 10 goals and 13 assists, and in UCL Fantasy, he scored 6 goals for Bayer Leverkusen and notching 31 goal contributions across all competitions. So I think Florian Wirtz should be held on to. I know there'll be a temptation to go for Reinders and all these different midfielders I'll be covering in this video and future podcasts, but Florian Wirtz is still worth keeping. Let's say, for example, he blanks by the time we get to Game Week 5, then the alarm bells will certainly be ringing, but I don't think that'll be the case. And even against Newcastle and or Arsenal, I could see Florian Wirtz performing extremely well. The final hold of this video is Jarrod Bowen, who faces the likes of Chelsea, Nottingham Forest, Tottenham, Crystal Palace and Everton over the next 5. He has performed against them in the past, and he's a very solid and consistent performer, but the reclassification from a midfielder to a forward has certainly hampered his FPL appeal, and I think the West Ham assets will be sold in droves after their 3-0 loss against Sunderland in Game Week 1. Jarrod Bowen was quite lively at the beginning. His XG was actually higher than Ollie Watkins at 0.19, but he ultimately blanked, and West Ham never looked like scoring in the second half, and Sunderland deserved that victory. But West Ham will still cause problems, I think, to certain teams, especially the kind of bigger clubs who will likely be having all of the ball. West Ham can sit back and hit them on the counter. That's where they play some of their best stuff and also cause the likes of Arsenal a lot of problems. I think Jarrod Bowen is worth keeping, but ultimately he doesn't look as appealing now as he probably did throughout pre-season, where he was doing really well in those friendlies. He got 13 goals and 11 fantasy assists in the previous Premier League campaign with 87 shots and also 193 FPL points. He was actually the most informed player of any single club, anything like that, the midfield and forward line, because of the sheer consistency. He was getting goals and assists in virtually every single game for the last 8 game weeks of this season, and I think Jarrod Bowen can still bounce back against the likes of Chelsea at home, who didn't look that great against Crystal Palace, of course, in Game Week 1, and I think West Ham could score a goal or two at their home ground, of course, and they will be looking to respond after that very disappointing defeat. The pressure will be on Graham Potter, I think, but he has got the best out of Jarrod Bowen during his spell at West Ham, and I think it's worth keeping the England international in your FPL teams. Another West Ham asset covered in this video is Aaron Wan-Bissaka, but he should be a sell rather than Jarrod Bowen, because West Ham will score plenty of goals and Bowen will be at the heart of it, but defensively, the Hammers can't be trusted. Wan-Bissaka only got 3 defensive contributions, which is far short of the 10 necessary to get the 2 additional points from DEFCON, so he ultimately blanked and got 1 point against Sunderland. It's Chelsea next, of course, and if you look at the next 5, I just don't see a clean sheet there for West Ham. Ultimately, they could surprise people, and maybe against one of Tottenham or Chelsea, they keep a clean sheet and win. Football is unpredictable, and Graham Potter is a decent manager, but I just don't really believe in West Ham defensively, and Wan-Bissaka should be sold. I can also see him going down in price fairly soon because his ownership was over 30%, and it's now at 23.9%. But he was great last season in Fantasy Premier League. He got 2 goals, 6 fantasy assists, 15 bonus points and 118 points overall. So there is a reason why Wan-Bissaka is so template. It isn't a priority sell, so to speak, but because he could go down to 4.4 million and you might need to bolster your defensive line in such scenarios, I'd be looking to sell Aaron Wan-Bissaka. With most Man City players, there is the elation of seeing them score a goal, even off the bench, and getting these massive returns. We saw it with Cherki, Reinders, Aït-Nouri, etc. But then you have Marmoush, who only played 24 minutes and didn't score or assist to give 1 point to his owners. The price tag at 8.5 million is simply too much for a player who won't start week in, week out, but I still think he'll get 25 plus starts in the Premier League, either up front to cover for Erling Haaland, but most likely you'll see him on the right, the left, and also across different positions, as we saw towards the tail end of last season. And I think he'll start against Tottenham. So based on that prediction, I think the best thing to do is keep him for Game Week 2 and then sell ahead of Brighton away and Man United at home. But ultimately, there isn't any formula. Maybe I get it wrong and Marmoush is benched once again, and by the time you sell him in Game Week 3, he starts against Brighton and then ultimately scores. That could certainly happen, but I think Marmoush is a sell in the long term, and you can find much better value with more consistency with the minutes, the returns through goals and assists, and the bonus points. So I think Marmoush is a sell at this point, but he was fairly decent for Man City since signing in January with 7 goals and 1 assist, 49 shots in limited game time, and he was also incredible for Frankfurt at that point of the season. So going into January, only Mohamed Salah had more goal contributions amongst Europe's top 5 leagues, but things have certainly changed since then, and Omar Marmoush is a massive minutes risk. The best Man City players in FPL are Erling Haaland, obviously, Reinders, and Ait Nouri. So if you're looking to triple up, that's the way I'd be looking to do it, and Marmoush isn't part of my FPL plans. The same applies to Mickey van der Ven, who produced a 6-pointer against Burnley. Very standard stuff, and I think Tottenham Hotspur look much better under Thomas Frank so far throughout pre-season, bar the Bayern Munich game. Obviously, they gave Paris Saint-Germain a great affair, and they really should have won that UEFA Super Cup final. And against Burnley, they won 3-0. Richarlison is looking very sharp, and Pedro Porro looks like an enticing FPL asset, but you might argue that Van der Ven offers better value at 4.5 million. But I think Van der Ven will be benched from time to time because of his injury record, and in certain easier games, we will see him getting a rest and really managing his load so he doesn't really increase the chance of getting injured, and also just to keep him fit for those really important games. He'll start against Man City, barring any injury concerns later on in the week, and I think he'll start in most of the games coming up over the next 5, and Tottenham Hotspur are right up there in the fixture difficulty rating as covered throughout all of my preseason content, and Van der Ven isn't a bad option at 4.5 million, but he has been transferred in by over 70,000 FPL managers, and I don't think it's worth it when he faces Man City away next. He can get points through DEFCON, and obviously he got 6 defensive contributions against Burnley, so maybe he'll get 10 plus against Man City, but I just don't see a clean sheet for Tottenham, even if they go on to win the game, as they have a great record at the Etihad and against Man City in general. But Van der Ven isn't one of the best defenders in the game. You can actually go for Lacroix instead for 0.5 million more. Nottingham Forest defenders as well, like Aina, Nico Williams, Milenkovic and Murillo. I'd recommend all of them instead. And Van der Ven isn't even the best Tottenham defender or amongst the very best free Tottenham assets in the game, at least in the long term. So Van der Ven for me is a skip, but you may feel differently. Let me know your thoughts down the comment section below. In the previous campaign, Van der Ven didn't score a single goal. He got 2 assists, only 2 bonus points and 32 FPL points. It's safe to say he will better all of those numbers this time round. He scored against Paris Saint-Germain in the UEFA Super Cup final. He isn't a bad option whatsoever, but he shouldn't be a priority transfer, especially in Game Week 2. Now you might be thinking, what about Ballard? He also costs 4.5 million. He faces Burnley away next. He just got 17 points courtesy of a goal, a great performance, DEFCON points. He's got low ownership. There's a lot to love about this pick. If you're wildcarding in Game Week 3, Ballard is absolutely fine for Game Week 2 specifically, but longer term, you can find better value at 4.5 million and below, and that includes from Sunderland themselves with Reinildo Mandava as the left back. He can also play as a centre-half, and Sunderland are looking at new signings. So Mukiele is coming to the club from Paris Saint-Germain, and they made a bid for John Lucami from Bologna. So that's something else that's worth monitoring. I think Ballard will still start most Premier League games for them, but I just don't think it's a great FPL pick in the long term, and this would be pure points chasing in my opinion. Now his stats from the Championship last season were decent, with 2 goals, 1 assist. He played 24 games and picked up 4 yellow cards. His ownership was so low when I covered him during the summer with 0.4% ownership, and it is currently at 2.7%, so we could see him reach 3-4% by the Game Week 2 deadline, but I think Ballard is a skip. I've been making transfer tips videos for years now, but in the last campaign I introduced 1 week punts, and Victor Gyökeres would be the pure definition of that in Game Week 2 facing Leeds United at home. I would still expect him to start over Kai Havertz, even though the German looked much better and sharper against Man United when he came off the bench. And you look at Arsenal's fixtures against Liverpool away, Nottingham Forest at home, Man City at home and Newcastle away, and sure, Victor Gyökeres can score against all of those clubs, and he scored a hat-trick against Man City in the Champions League last season. But from an FPL perspective, Ollie Watkins is still the superior pick over the next 5 game weeks, and Gyökeres is purely a game week 2 punt against Leeds United at home. So if you are free hitting, go for the likes of Viktor Gyökeres, maybe Saka, and an Arsenal defender like Saliba or Gabriel. You've also got Raya in goal, but ultimately, I wouldn't be looking to buy Arsenal attackers for the next 5 game weeks. But sure, David Raya, these defenders that I just mentioned, even Calafiori at the moment, they are all reasonable, and I don't mind covering Arsenal defensively, even against the biggest and best teams in the country. They are unbeaten against the so-called Big Six in over 1,000 days, but I think offensively they still need a lot to improve on. They were terrible against Man United, but got the job done through Calafiori and a set piece, and Gyökeres, of course, blanked. He didn't even make it to the 60-minute mark. He was subbed off just seconds beforehand, and he got an expected assist figure of 0.06 and had no shots whatsoever. But for Sporting, he was an absolute beast last season with 39 goals in the Portuguese league, 8 assists, and in the Champions League, he got 6 goals in 8 matches. Across all competitions, he produced 67 goal contributions. These are incredible numbers. It might take some time to adapt, and his performance was certainly poor against Man United, but I think over time, he will become a great Premier League striker and score plenty of goals, because Arsenal need that. Not someone who's going to link up, even though that would be preferable, and you've got the technique and you can also distribute the passes, but Arsenal need a clinical finisher, and that's what Viktor Gyökeres brings to the Arsenal side. And against Leeds, I could see him scoring his first competitive goal for the Gunners. So I think Gyökeres is a one-week punt, but you might be thinking, his ownership is so high, what about a differential? Martin Odegaard could be the solution. He got 5 points against Man United, courtesy of 14 defensive contributions. So he got the additional 2 points, the clean sheet, and of course the 2 points for playing the full 90. He didn't score or assist, but I think he was the best Arsenal attacker in terms of any midfielder. I know Zubimendi was also decent, but Saka was poor, Martinelli, Gyökeres himself, and most players in general for the Gunners were definitely below par. But I think Odegaard had good moments in the game, and he is building upon a decent pre-season. He'll be much better in this campaign than he was in the previous season, which was by far his worst in an Arsenal shirt. But Odegaard only costs 8 million, and against the Leeds side that will be sitting back and probably employing a low block and trying to frustrate Arsenal, Odegaard will be key in unlocking their defence and creating those chances for Viktor Gyökeres, and I think the Gunners will be more direct this season. We saw elements of that against Man United, and Odegaard will benefit greatly from this new system. The most transferred out players at this point of the game week include Florian Wirtz, who is top, with 264,000 managers transferring the German out. Gvardiol is second. Alexander Isak, who has been axed from the Newcastle squad for the time being, he is third. Then you've got Konsa, who is suspended for game week 2. João Pedro, a very big disappointment, of course, from the opening game week. Jarrod Bowen, Frimpong, Marmoush, Palmer, Watkins, Gyökeres, Wan-Bissaka all have over 100,000 transfers out, and the rest, of course, you can see on screen. And I did recommend a lot of different websites in my recent podcast, the reaction stream, going into Game Week 2 and, of course, reviewing the Game Week 1 action so far. I do appreciate your support throughout the summer. It has been a pleasure covering FPL once again, and I did talk about the Club World Cup, of course, in June and July, and UCL Fantasy will return to this channel in the coming weeks. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description, and a 5-star review goes a long way to boosting us even further across all social media platforms. I'll see you very soon for the Game Week 2 deadline stream on Friday, and keep your eyes peeled for UCL Fantasy content.